and welcome to another part of Design Your Own Level tutorial. In this video, what we will be doing is we will be creating these pillars over here, just using a normal cube static mesh inside of Unreal Engine 4. We will be setting up a material instance for it. So we will be covering a little bit of material instances so that we can both use the same material on two different objects and adjust the UV layout or the UV tiling for it so that they don't like stretch or warp. And then lastly, we will be creating this bookshelf over here. This is a slight variation to the ones that I created in the video, but as I explained, that you can try and make your own bookshelf yourself, or just try and create something that looks unique to you, something that you want to make. And then that's pretty much it. So material instances, pillars, and bookshelf that we'll be covering in this tutorial. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, so let's just get started with what we need to do. Now, in this particular video, I will be covering three different things, and two of them will like blend in together for one object, and the one is just a basic modeling task that we'll be doing. So if you want to just skip to each one of those, I did put a timeline link in the description below. So the first thing we'll be covering is we will be adding our pillars. If we could just go to our video over here, we'll be adding these pillars just using like Unreal's built-in cube static mesh actor. And then we will be applying a different material to it using material instances. Okay, so we'll be creating a material instance from our material so that we can kind of like edit everything on the fly. I did create a separate concrete material for this. I'll put a link also in the description below. I did this in exactly the same way that we created our previous concrete material. If you don't know how to make this concrete material, I'll put a link in the top right corner. And what I essentially did is I made them in exactly the same way so that the color with them blends perfectly. So as you can see there, it kind of like has exactly the same look. Okay, and then the last thing that we will be doing is we will be creating like this, let's just see where it is, this bookshelf over here. It is a bookshelf, as you can see right over there. It's just, we'll be creating 2 or 3 different variations of it, and then we'll just like stack them next to one another and then set it up inside of Unreal Engine 4. Alright, so that's going to be actually a fairly easy process because it's just a basic modeling, and we'll just be applying a normal material to it. These little orange sides we will be covering a bit later when we do like our cleanup phase. So for now, let's just get started with our material instance and our like pillars that we will be creating. Okay, so what you want to do is you just click on the basic here under modes by Unreal. You'll see there's the cube brush. Now you'll remember we did, if you did follow from the first video, we did the same with these ones over here. And I'm just going to drag this into the world. And I'm going to set values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit spacebar to get that scaling, and then I'm going to scale it twice, and then this one I'm just going to scale once. And then I think our roof was essentially 12 meters high, so instead of just messing around with it here, I'm going to be setting the values over there. But I'm not going to be setting 12, I think I'm going to be setting 14. Okay, and the reason for that is if we can just get back to our video. If you actually look at it, let's just pause. There, you can see, well, I clicked on like the perfect spot, but you could see that it just like kind of blends straight into the floor. It doesn't have like any support struts or anything for it. You can possibly make your own and add it in later. But even with the tile floor, let's just see. I think it might be better to look from this side. There we go. It just like moves straight into the floor. There's no breakup or variation to it whatsoever. So the tile floor, it just like moves straight through it. There's no cuts on the tiles or anything like that. So that's a little bit of sloppy modeling there, or level editing. But as I said before, if you can get away with it, then do it. it's not really that big a deal. So players won't really notice. And I'm pretty sure actually if you go to the video and you try and if you could go into Mirror's Edge and go through the floor, you'll see that the pillar actually protrudes through the bottom like this one here as well. Alright, but enough of that. Let's just scale out our pillar the way that we want it to. And then I'm going to rotate it by 10 degrees. So you kind of like get that nice, that strange look. And we'll just make sure that this actually surpasses the roof. So if we do add a roof in, everything will be perfectly fine. And then I'm just going to actually remove this piece over here. I actually think that one as well. And I want to duplicate this by holding Alt and then dragging it off. And then I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees. And let's just kind of like bring it in. Now this is going to be something a little bit weirder because you'll notice that it will overlap over our mirror, oh, sorry, not our mirror, our windows over here. But it pretty much does exactly the same thing inside of the Mirror's Edge video, which I always found a little bit weird because I don't know if anyone would build, okay, well, video's a bit blurry if I pause it, but as you can see that they literally just go in front of the mirrors. Again, I say mirrors, windows. This one might be a better shot, and we could take it like frame by frame. As you can see, it's just literally in front of the windows. I said windows correct. And there's actually no reason for that. It's very strange. It's very weird. I don't understand why they did something like that. It doesn't make any real sense. But again, I added a support, well, like a in-between gap here, so I don't really need to do this, but I kind of want to match their look that they have, so I'll try and go for it. I'm just going to get this one to rotate maybe a bit more, maybe let's do 20 degrees, and we'll do something like that. And then I'm just going to copy it off again and rotate it by, I think this should be -90. There we go. And just so you can kind of like get a fairly similar look to what they were going for. Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, these ones don't quite go through the floor, so I'm just going to move them down a bit. And there we go. And then we can like put our areas back here. I'm just going to change its scale. Remember when we created these, we like used a plain reflective material, so there was absolutely no reason for us to there will be no texture warping or anything on this, which is kind of nice if you work with these type of objects a lot. Okay, so now we've done it like that. You can maybe put one or two over here, but I just wanted to place a few because we're going to be editing them now. Now also note that these are perfectly, they're just perfect cubes, so they have rather hard edges. We can always export these into Unreal Engine, not into Unreal, to Blender like we did before, and just add some bevel to it so it's got like nice smooth corners. But for now we're just going to go with these because the main focus is actually the material instance that we will be creating. I also still think that these might be a little bit too large, but then again we can always mess around with it later. Yeah, let's do it now. There we go. I'm a bit more happy with that, this size. Alright, so this one we're also going to be doing 0.25. It just looks a little bit better. It doesn't really look like a proper support pillar inside of Mirror's Edge itself, so that looks a little bit better. Okay, so enough of that. Let's get to material instance. So what a material instance essentially is you take a material, you right click it, and you create a material instance of it. And then you apply that material instance to whatever object. So it will be independent of the material, but it will use material attributes which you can edit. So just to show you quickly what I mean, for instance, let's say I want the exact same concrete texture. Let's just delete that instance for now. I want the exact same concrete texture on this static mesh over here. So I drag it off. I'm like, okay, no, that doesn't quite match up. So my natural reaction is to go inside of the material, right click, add a texture coordinate node, and then feed this into the texture samples that we have for the color, the roughness, and the normal map, and then change the UV tiling. So let's say 14, I think it was. Let's just see if we apply it. Okay, I kind of like mixed the two, so it was actually 1 here and 14 here, and we apply it. Okay, so now we will get we have a nice look over here. We're like, okay, that looks perfect. That's exactly what I want. But now we go back to somewhere else where we use the material, and it's like, okay, no, that's not tiling the way that I want it to at all. So with that out of the equation, what we're just going to do is let's just break off all of these and change this back to 1. So now what we want to do is, remember when you work with material instances, you want to work with parameters. Now I'm going to show you now what I mean. Like for instance, here we created a roughness parameter. Let's just actually give it a name and call it roughness. Roughness, there we go. And if you create a material instance, which I did before and I just deleted it, and you'll see that the vector value is over there. It's still set as none, I think, because I didn't apply it. Let's just apply and save. And there we go. You'll see the roughness value is there. So you can click it and then you can like change the roughness value and make your object more shiny. So you want to work with vector parameters, or just let's say parameters specifically. So what we want now is we want something to drive the texture coordinates. So in order for us to do that, we need to add a parameter. I think it's a scalar parameter. Yes, it's a scalar parameter. We'll be creating 2 of these. And this one we're going to be giving a name tiling. Did I make 2 eyes? I did make 2 eyes. There we go. And then this one we will be calling tiling. To try and keep up with the naming conventions that they have over here. Okay, so now we got these, and now I want to right click and create a append vector. So we'll take these 2 over here and here, and then right click again, and I want to add a multiply. So now what I'm going to do is I'll put it over there. I'm going to feed the texture coordinates into A, the append into B, and then the results I'll feed into each one of the UVs. There we go. And now you'll see that kind of messed everything up. Now we're just going to give it a default value of 1. And there we go. Now our texture looks exactly the way that it did before. So now I'm happy. I'm going to click save. I'm going to click apply. Okay, and close that out. And then the instance that we created before, if we go into it, you'll see that over there we have now 2 different, I'm just going to deselect that, 2 different scalar parameter values for tiling. So if we go into them, and we kind of just like drag it off, and you can see that we can change the tiling method on the fly, which is a very nice way to do it if you're going to be using this texture multiple times. So now what we can do is we can create an instance for each time we use the texture on a different wall or a different object. But for now, I'm just going to leave the original material attached to this wall over here, and I'll be using the material instance on our pillar over here. So what I just want to do is I'm just going to create a new folder inside of my materials and just call it instances, and I'll be moving this in here. Just so we know where our instances is and we don't mix it up with our materials and have like a million things over here. So we just have one over here. So now I'm just going to drag that off onto there. And now you see it hasn't changed. The reason why it hasn't changed is because we still need to set the values over here. Okay, so let's just see. Okay, so the values that we set over here, like the scale on the x-axis and the scale on the z-axis, we're going to be using that to drive this over here. So now I think it's on the vertical, we're going to set this to 14 to match up with the scale over here. And then on the horizontal, we're going to be setting that to 0.25 to match the scale over here. And if we click apply, you'll see that, there we go. Okay, this one doesn't have a lot of light on it. Let's just go to the top. There we go. So now you can see that our material is actually perfectly lined up the way that, or to the size of our cube that we stretched out. So now we can just like drag these off onto the different ones over here. And there we go. I don't like the material all that much. I thought it might look a little bit better, but it had like this stripe here in the middle, which if you actually look at the texture itself, you don't actually see that. So if I just open a texture, you see it's right there on the corner and you don't actually see it at all. So I thought it was just like a clean concrete material. I'll probably replace this later on, but this is just to give you an idea of how you can use this. Now, if you don't want it to perfectly line up with this one, we can always just change the values. I think maybe if we do like the double values, that might look a little bit better, a little bit different variation. And then what we can also do now, because we already created the material instance, and remember that this texture that we created here is essentially a grayscale texture. So now, let's say we want our pillars to be a different color. So now we can also do that using the material instance. So now I'm going to create a vector parameter. And I'm going to call this my base color. And then I'm going to add a multiply. You can add a multiply or a lerp node. I think a multiply might be better for this. We're going to feed it in like so. And now you can see the two are going to blend and it's going to give you like a pitch black texture. But now let's click apply. I actually think we want it to be a completely white value. There we go. Because the white value will make it like the perfect value that it, or exactly the color it was before, so that we don't mess up with this wall texture that we used before. Well, we can create a different material instance for it. It's not really going to be much of a hassle. So I'm just going to close this off, and now you'll see that we have a base color value over here. So now, for instance, let's go look at, I'm just going to drag this off. Let's look at our instance that we applied to this. We're going to change the base color, and let's do something like a red, or we could do something blue, green, whatever color you want. So now we essentially have different variations to the colors that we wanted. I want to go for a bit more of a, still going to use the white look, but let's go for darker. Actually, this one I want very light. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to duplicate this material instance. We're going to call this one concrete 2 pillars. Okay. And this one I'm going to call, oh, well, let's maybe do this. Let's put it in front of it so that it will be easier if we have multiple materials that we're going to be working with. So let's call this one pillar. So pillar concrete 2, wall concrete 2. I'm just going to remove that instance because we have it inside of our instance folder, so we know that it's a material instance. And then I'm going to open this one. I'm going to apply this to all the walls, and you're not going to see a change immediately. except for the scaling. So let's just change it back to 1. So let's apply all of these. There we go. There we go. I think that's all of them. And then we're going to set the color to a darker tone. Something like that. Yeah, let's just apply that over there. Okay, so now we have a material instance for our pillars over here. Let's apply that one back over there. So now that the walls are slightly darker in color, and now these pillars are slightly lighter, it kind of like gives you the illusions that these came in much later, that the walls were built first, and this came in significantly later, that they added the support struts maybe for different roofs that they put in or things like that. So that's just a way that you can use material instances to just get some different color variation inside of your level itself. Okay, so that's it. This part is done. Now I'm going to be moving on to the modeling part for creating our bookshelf. So that's material instances done, and let's get started to modeling our bookshelf. Alright, so let's just jump over to Blender. And then I'm just going to open the level layout that we did, and as you can see, these are the lights that we created before. I did notice one thing when I created these lights, and I'd just like to mention it, that because I added additional cuts to these lights, or just additional edges when I was using the curves tool, I didn't UV unwrap the all the wires, so you can see actually on the UVs that it just like makes a little dot. So most of my UVs were overlapping. So if you have a similar issue and you're like wondering what happened, this is what it's supposed to look like, if you can recall, on the side. And if you have a similar issue when you build and you see that it says overlapping UVs and you don't know what that's about, it is because of this. So that was like a mistake on my side. You don't really notice it because of the fact that this doesn't contain a texture. It's just like a plain color material attached to it. But if you want to make something else a little bit later on, that might cause a problem. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go over to like a clean side over here, and I'm going to add let's do a cube, and then while in wireframe mode, I'm going to scale it on the y-axis. We're going to scale it in. Actually, I think I want it a bit thinner, so I'm just going to select all of this and grab and move it up. Now we actually want to get our scale, so I'm going to hold shift and then just click here. I don't think it was here. There we go. On our second layer, so we kind of like get an idea of how large it's supposed to be. So we can move it all the way over to our wall. And now remember, if you follow along all the way, you'll know that these walls over here is essentially the same as these walls over here. So we can kind of like judge the size. So we want this to be about halfway through, about half the size. So this one over here, we want it to be roughly half the size. So now we can kind of like try and judge what our sizes and scaling should be. Okay, so now I'm going to take this one, I'm just going to move it up. And I think I'm going to grab it on its side and move it inward. Okay, and then I'm just going to take this one and grab it down. Oops, let's grab it down. And we can see that it should be pretty much all the way from about there to there. So that's a bit big. And we can do it maybe something like that. Remember, you can always rescale all of this inside of Unreal Engine 4 if the sizes don't match up to what you want. So keep that in mind. Okay, this is about the thickness of the pillar, so we want this to be roughly the same thickness. So that is essentially 5 units. So we're going to scale this to 5 units. And then what we're going to do is we are going to rotate it. Well, actually, I think I want to maybe create a first variation of it before I start with the whole rotation, just in case things don't go the way that I want it to. So let's just carry on with modeling it from this side. So I'm going to hit Control R, and I'm just going to like add a loop cut, and I actually want this to snap to grid, but I want it to snap to the larger grid, so something like that. And then hit Control R again, and then do the same thing, move it up, and snap it to grid. And then what we can do is we select these sides here and hit E to extrude. Okay, maybe that's a bit much, so do something like that. Okay, so then we have our first bookshelf variation. And I think actually what we can do is we can experiment a little bit. So we can select all these, hit E to extrude, and maybe move it down. I think that might work a little bit better. Let's just see. Okay, now it doesn't actually extrude all the corners. No, that's not what I want. But what we can do is we can select these. And we can essentially just hit Shift D and duplicate and then move it to where we want it. So now we're not going to get the same variation as this, but essentially that's not really going to matter. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of these. And let's just hide this for now, because that's kind of in my way at the moment. So let's just delete all of these faces. I'm going to select this, hit F to fill, and then this one over here that we made before. I actually want to just make sure, okay, that doesn't have a face over there. But these ones, let's just make sure that they are separated, because we kind of doing something a little bit stranger. Alright. Okay, so now we can actually just take all of this and stack these up where we want them. The thickness bugs me a little bit. I think they should be about half the size of what they are here. So maybe we can do that, scale on the Z-axis and do something like that. And snap it to grid just to make sure that it snaps properly. Okay, then I'm actually just going to take this one and delete it, because now we got the right size that we wanted, the right scaling and everything. And then we could just duplicate this a few times. But bear in mind that this is going to be like the longest one of our bookshelf struts. So we can do something like this. And then what we can do is we can add different sizes. So scale on the x-axis, do something like that. It might matter because we're going to put one side to a wall. It might matter if we do it more in line. Essentially this side is going to go flat against the wall. So I do something like that. Something like this. And then the last one we do. Just so we can get the different sizes. Okay. So that is the first one of our bookshelf variations done. But now also it's a very square look. So I maybe do want to do something like add a loop cut. Let's just go here, add a loop cut here. No, not there. Add a loop cut here. And then take the top piece here and then do something like that. And then do the same with the bottom piece over here, but a little bit higher up, so we can do something like that. Okay, still a very square look. We can try and make it a little bit more round at the top, but I'm fairly happy with the way that this looks, so I'm not going to mess around with it too much. But now we just need to get it to kind of like line up to our wall. So if we unhide our wall, and remember that this essentially, it was very it wasn't straight. It was a very, well, if I could bring the video up again. There we go. As you can see, it kind of like just curves. It's at like a 45-degree angle. I don't actually know if these go straight into the wall. They might, because of it just being like a singular texture. So actually the way that we're doing it here might be perfect, because then we can just kind of like do something like this. Rotate it 45. Let's do -45. And then just kind of like drag it into the wall all the way like that. That doesn't look all that great, because I think our strut might be on the opposite side. Or, come on, allow me to undo. Okay, doesn't want to allow me to undo, so rotate 45. Let's do it again and try it from this side, so we could do something like that. And as you can see, that actually looks pretty good, but that's still a bit too far in, so we'll do something maybe like this and bring it out like that, and then just take all of these edges out and maybe extrude them, or just grab them and bring them further out. I'm just like doing a demonstration here at the current moment, so you can kind of like get an idea of the look that you want. So you can see that's how they look over there, so they're not quite perfect, so that is fairly similar. So I'll be happy if we can do something like that. Alright, so I'm just going to undo everything that I did there. I'm going to hide this again, and then I noticed that they are about the same thickness as what those are over there, so I'm going to take this side and I'm just going to grab and bring it in so it's also just 5 units wide. Now we're kind of like getting more of a look that we want. I'm going to take this side again, and as I said, you want to kind of like make it a little bit longer so that we can get a better idea. And then once we're done with all of these, then I'm just going to duplicate this, and then for instance I'm going to take it and scale it on the Z-axis, maybe make this one smaller. Take this one and delete it. This one, delete it as well. And we don't want them to like line up perfectly, so we'll do something like that. And take these two and then move them up like that. And again, this is all basically what do you want to do with this bookshelf? Do you want it to look incredibly awesome? What is your idea for it? Do you want to go for a sci-fi look? So it all really depends. So I said we're going to make like basically 3 different variations of this. And note that I'm not making one and then duplicating it, making UVs and then duplicating it, because I think each one of these should have like a different UV layout. So that's what I'm going for over here. And let's just take this one again. We're going to Shift E, duplicate, and also drag that off. And just scale this on the Z-axis, make it slightly different. So now you also don't want to have like a similar look. So we take this one, and this one we're going to take all the way over there. And then also I think I'm going to adjust the height. So I'll put this one like over there. And then I'm literally just going to take one of these and delete it. Alright. And then Shift D, duplicate this one, move this one up, and then take its pillars and maybe move them. I think I'm going to delete that. Alright, so let's see. They have quite a whole bunch of different ones set up. Some of them go like very, very different from the original. So let's maybe do it like that. I think I want to duplicate this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a small one like right in the center. So maybe we move this one here. And then I'm going to take this one over here and move that to about there. But then I'm going to scale it. I'll just scale this part on the z-axis so it's like very tiny. Maybe bring it up to something like that. And it's just got its two supports, which I don't want to line up with that one over there so perfectly. I just move them down. And that looks pretty good. I think I'm happy with that. I like the way that it came out. So I'm just going to use this. Now also remember that we want to center this with our world. So I'm kind of going to go for something like this. But I think I'm going to make that this one's corner is like the top end. And I'm going to pretty much leave this flat shaded at the current moment because I want to get like a perfect reflective look to it. And then I'm just going to do some quick UVs for it. Go into the UV editor, hit Smart UV Project. We're just going to add small island margin. And they all line up pretty nicely. Happy with that. It's not a perfect model. And then we just want to give it a name as well. Just before we carry on, I'm going to call this bookshelf. As you can see, I have a whole bunch of things here that I still haven't given proper names to. And we're just going to export directly from here to Unreal Engine 4 just to see if everything works. So I'm going to call this bookshelf. Now also you can export each one of these individually. I'll show you now. So selected objects only, edge detect, and disable the leaf bone, and click export. Remember always to do selected objects only, otherwise if you work like I do and you have all these random objects, it will try to export every single one in one go, so try not to do that. Okay, so you can export each one of these individually if you want. You can select this one, okay, select all of these, and then hit P and separate by selection, and then you can, like, for instance, just hit that one and export it if you want to try and do a bit more variations in your sizes. Okay, so let's jump over to Unreal. I'm going to go over to my nope, it's under models. There we go. I'm going to hit import, and we call this bookshelf. There we go. And just import. Yay, that looks pretty good. It's very low poly actually, and we could get away with a lot more. And let's just go to materials, and we're going to use the generic black table material on this. Okay, there we go. And now you're going to see something, because I didn't really think it through properly, because it's going to be fairly straight, which is why you might want to add these in one by one, is that, there we go. Alright, that looks pretty good, but now I can't rotate them individually to kind of like get that curved look that they had inside of Mirror's Edge, which is a slight bit disappointing, but we can quickly fix that. We're going to select all of these, and I think actually just one by one. Let's do one by one. Length, rotate 45. Okay, rotate -45. There we go. Length, nope, don't want that bottom one. Then go to the top, rotate -45. So I'm just going to do this with each one. Length, rotate -45. Length, rotate -45. Length, rotate -45. But now also you have to take into account that this might go through your wall at one point. So it all really depends on where you want to stack them. If you want to keep them like this, or you want to keep them perfect look that you have over here. I actually think I should have rotated them the opposite direction. Let's try something quickly. I want to add a mirror modifier. I don't actually want it to mirror like that, but okay, this is also another way how you can get different variations if you want to mess around with it a bit more. Okay. Oops, I wasn't supposed to do that. There we go. Actually, the thing is, I want all of these to be on this side over here. So that's actually just why I was trying the mirror modifier, but I'm not going to be stressing too much about this now. Let's try it again and export. And so just that we can kind of like get the look that we're going for, or just get an idea. You can always work on it a little bit later, which I probably am going to do, because I'm not too happy with the way that it looks at the current moment. So let's see. Okay, it doesn't go through on the other side, but I actually should have had rotate the opposite direction. It's a little bit stupid of me, but that's okay. You learn new things as you go along. Alright, so that's our basic bookshelves done. It's not as flashy as the Mirror's Edge ones, but you get the basic idea. We can maybe make this slightly smaller and add a bit more variation to it. You can import these individually, so you can get a lot of different variations to it. So it all really depends on what you want to do. So again, I am going to just mess around with this a bit more. I'm possibly going to rotate it the opposite direction. You can even try and maybe make that it actually like is completely flat to the wall. I didn't want to do that because I figured that maybe later on you can use these individually on different walls if you want them flat or rotated in opposite direction. So I didn't really want to mess with making them line up with the wall perfectly. I think that's not really productive to what I wanted to do. Okay, so essentially that's it. That's done. I'm just, as I said, I'm gonna mess around with it a little bit more, maybe add it to the opposite direction, and maybe add one or two more additional ones. I see these ones line up too perfectly. That one's maybe a bit high, and maybe add one additional one here at the end, so that we can kind of get that look that they are going for, because they have quite a significant amount of them there. I think also that their like shelving here is slightly smaller than what mine is. Mine is fairly large, so I'll mess around with that as well. Okay, so that's this part of the tutorial done. I hope you liked all the three things that we covered: material instances, just a pillar that we added, and then this bookshelf as well. So again, if you like what you saw, please leave a like, please subscribe. If you didn't like it, you can leave a dislike. I would like to see all of you in the next video, so thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.